At the University of Dundee's Centre for Anatomy and Human Identification, the History Cold Case team is about to embark on a remarkable new investigation.
We have got 113 skeletons, all male, signs of unusual conditions. We're not talking about 1 or 2 skeletons, we're talking about hundreds. So it's a very big story.
The case will be led by forensic anthropologist Professor Sue Black. Dr. Xanthi Mallet will gather historical evidence, while Professor Caroline Wilkinson will rebuild the faces of the dead. In York, more than 100 skeletons have been found in 10 mass graves. It's an extraordinary archaeological find and the biggest case the team has ever had to deal with. Why did so many people die here?
It's very, very unusual.
I've never seen a grave like that, to be honest with you.
The trail will transport us back 350 years to one of the most traumatic and pivotal events in British history.
You just lunge forward straight into the faces of the enemy there.
To a time when medical intervention could be as dangerous as life on the battlefield.
If I take it off at the shoulder, the chances are you will die.
When men believed they were caught up in Armageddon.
They thought that they were fighting in the last battle between Christ and the forces of Antichrist.
And to one man's surprising story.
Oh boy, that is outrageous.
That will not only change our views on how the English Civil War was fought, but provide a unique window into the birth of democracy itself. In the heart of York, the History Cold Case team has set up its mobile forensic unit, near where the remains of 113 people were recently excavated. This is the biggest case the team has ever taken on. Members of the local archaeological community lay out a selection of remains from 10 mass graves, discovered in 2008 just beyond the city walls. Every single skeleton is male. But there are also the boxed remains of 2 further bodies that have especially troubled archaeologists since excavation. Their bones show signs of puzzling abnormalities. Why did 113 men end up buried together? And what's the truth behind the disfigured bodies?
There's a lot of dead people here, and so there needs to be an explanation for why you've got so many in one place. Every single one of those people will have a story. Some of them are going to have a really interesting story to tell.
Professor Sue Black and Dr. Xanthi Mallet fly in from Dundee HQ. Together they will carry out a preliminary examination of the recovered bones.
There's a lot here.
Immediately, they find many signs of healed trauma and bone breaks.
Oh, look, there's a problem in the elbow. Whether it's a dislocation, it's really hard to dislocate that joint, though. Really, really hard to dislocate it. It looks as if there's a bit of remodeling going on at the wrist. I wonder if that's a previous fracture.
And there are signs of serious infections.
Oh, ho, ho. Look at this. Ouch.
Look at the amount of bone that's been laid down.
That is nasty.
That's very nasty. That's very painful for the time that it's been active.
Which
Whether
is
it's
a
still
while,
active or not,
yeah.
I don't know. It's a lot of bone being laid down. That's infective. You know, you've got nerve endings that are inflamed. You've got the pus formation. Oh, it's just not nice at all.
Literally, look, it goes all the way through. And there's like.
But it's localised. A simple course of antibiotics today, and that's gone.
Yeah.
Yet all the bones are of strong, young and middle-aged men.
I think we're looking at male, quite well-defined chin.
Quite robust.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
With no obvious cause of death.
They've got previous fractures,
Yeah,
and they've got trauma
But they've
associated with their previous
Yeah.
life. But why did they die?
Don't know. Don't know.
There's no evidence of a cause of death on here
not on any of them.
either. There's no obvious disease process. There's no obvious trauma process. There's nothing. So whatever killed him may have killed them, but it hasn't left
We're
a
not
mark.
seeing it.
And there's lots and lots of things that don't leave a mark.
They turn their attention to the 2 boxes that the archaeologists have marked out as being particularly strange. Inside the first, the skeleton of an incredibly muscular male, at first glance consistent with the rest of the group.
We're talking about quite a big, robust adult. But I tell you what I think is interesting is that clavicle's being bound down onto there really, really tightly. So there's huge muscle mass
And this
going
is
on up
pretty
here.
robust as well.
It's not only robust, what you've also got within that bone is a huge amount of torsion.
You can see
because
it's
you
twisted.
can see, and that's the muscle attaching onto there.
You can actually
that's
see the
just
movement, can't you,
trying
by
to get
mechanics.
more of a grip.
Yep.
So he's very well built.
But he has one highly unusual feature that sets him apart.
Oh, wow.
His hand bones are fused together.
Okay, see, that's interesting. Okay, I'll tell you why that's interesting, because that is a congenital fusion of the carpals, congenital carpal fusion. Really, really rare. But there's not going to have been much in the way of disability. You know, all you're losing is a little bit of movement like that. So, you know, his little finger gets stuck out there. It doesn't ever come across here.
Then there is the final set of remains for Sue and Xanthi to examine.
Oh!
This man has an even more dramatic bone defect.
Oh my.
Okay.
Well.
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 Oh, this is very, very, very unusual.
His elbow and knee are both fused. The bones have grown together. To Sue, this does not look like the trauma found on the other bodies.
Oh boy. You know, it could be so many things. If you take the left limb, so there's the humerus sitting like that, fused at right angles at the elbow, but look how it's fused.
And the fused knee joint is even more debilitating.
I have to say, that is outrageous.
That is a very odd angle.
But look at that buttress that you've got on here.
So muscle.
Huge amount of muscle that's
So this is not a wasting, you're not talking somebody who is kind of wasting and not moving.
Right. Functionally, that would be better if it was fused
Of course,
vertical.
Straight. Yeah.
Sue has found what she thinks might be a rare congenital condition in 2 different men. Her first thought, could they be related?
That is the singularly most unusual set of carpal coalitions that I have ever seen. And right next door to it is the most outrageous fusion of an elbow at 90 degrees and a knee at 90 degrees. I'd really like to know if they're related.
Yeah.
The condition suffered by these 2 men is entirely unexpected, given the nature of the rest of the group.
He has a distinct disability, a distinct disability.
It's now a 2-fold investigation. Firstly, the group as a whole, over 100 men. Who were they and what killed them all? But also, what is the story of these 2 men with their dramatically fused bones?
The evidence at the moment, if we were looking at this in a purely cold light of day forensic scenario, is we have 2 individuals, male, of mature age, adult males, who have got congenital abnormalities, or we suspect them to be. We can't make any other link at this stage. But watch the space.
Testing gets underway immediately, including DNA sampling, CT scanning, isotopic analysis, and carbon dating.
So what I'm going to do now is take some samples of this femur, which is the right leg bone of the male with the strange development. I'm going to take 2 different samples. One's going to be used for the stable isotopes, looking at the provenancing, possibly telling us about diet and maybe where they were. The other one's going to be used for dating the sample, so that's going to really pin down when these people died.
The team will need to wait some weeks for the results to come back. In the meantime, Xanthi needs to gather evidence from the area. So next morning she meets local archaeologist Graham Bruce, who supervised the excavations. Graham had been excavating a site just 100 yards or so outside York's city walls, defences that have stood since Roman times.
Okay, here we are. This is the site where we found all the mass graves.
Back in the Middle Ages, there was a church on this site, and Graham expected to find a traditional medieval graveyard. But instead, he was shocked to uncover large pits containing the bodies of over 100 men.
We've got some pictures of the graves themselves in here. Let's see on this one, where you've got...
And they're all lined up?
They're lined up within the graves.
Where were the mass graves within here?
They were predominantly within the church itself, respecting the main wall lines. So the walls must have still been standing, at least partially, when the graves were cut into.
The mass graves were dug inside the church, and Graham believes this must have happened sometime after records show it fell into ruins in the 1580s. And Graham also believes the graves must date from before the 1700s.
By the 18th century in York as well, you've got better cartographic sources, and the maps show this area as open agricultural land with no other buildings on it. So you haven't got anywhere you'd be wanting to put a major 18th century burial ground here.
Carbon dating will confirm whether Graham's theory is correct. But if the mass graves do date from around the 1600s, what does Graham think could be the cause?
Looking at the actual way in which they've been buried, what are your theories on this?
When we started finding mass graves, you do start obviously trying to work out why. It's clearly a major, fairly cataclysmic event that has created all these people dying at the same time. And in the mid-17th century, you have the English Civil War.
Graham's theory is that these bodies could have been victims of the English Civil War. With no women and children amongst the group, could they in fact have been soldiers? Dating back to one of Britain's most brutal and savage periods of conflict. Back at Dundee HQ, Xanthi and Sue get Professor Caroline Wilkinson up to speed, using computer graphics of the burial site and the two most curious bodies.
Now, what you can see here is the church. The
Sorry, I
church
wasn't clear.
was in ruins when
Church
they were
was in
buried.
ruins, I understand. Okay.
So after
but they've
1580s.
observed the lines of the ruins.
Yes.
I understand.
And these are our two individuals.
But not treated any differently. I mean, they're buried in exactly the same way.
Exactly the same way.
Okay.
Such a lot of them. 113.
You can say the number really quickly, but then when you actually see it,
No.
it looks like an awful lot of people.
And somebody's taken care putting them all in like that. We'll be getting carbon dates, but we don't have those yet, so obviously they're going to help us pinpoint it. But really we're looking at the Civil War simply because of where they are, and also the number of people in that type of demographic of population. So we'll know more, but this is quite helpful contextually.
The team agrees that the obvious starting place for the larger investigation is to gather more details on the Civil War and how it might have affected the city of York.
I'm absolutely happy that, you know, we can explain it in terms of a potential military, because that fits, that you've got a lot of men of fighting sort of age together.
And how is it the man with severely fused knee and elbow came to be buried amongst what could be a group of soldiers?
We've got a lot more to find out about this guy. I suppose what he would have been doing in this population for a start. Yeah.
Because he is, I mean, he's disabled.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no getting away from the fact that he's got a physical disability.
What does a disabled man do in military services? And like the others, he was strong sites of muscle attachment, so he was active.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's a big story. even thinking about the occupations that he might have been involved in, it was really quite exciting, because why on earth is he buried with all these men who I suspect, you know, are relatively healthy, if you can be when you're dead, but, you know, relatively healthy young men of fighting age, perhaps in a military background. What's he doing there?
Professor Caroline Wilkinson is going to reconstruct the faces of the two men with the puzzlingly fused bones. She starts with the man in his early 40s with just the fused hand.
Hey, that might be a nasal bone. Excellent. So we've got quite a prominent nose, but it doesn't look underdeveloped.
At this early stage, this man's face seems unaffected by his bone condition, though Caroline spots something that will affect his appearance.
He's lost one of his front teeth at the top, and that's before he died, so it's well healed.
This appears consistent with him being a soldier.
Losing your front incisors is something that's common with people who fight. The teeth next to it look pretty healthy. They're not showing signs of decay, so you know, maybe it being knocked out would be the most likely option.
But what of the more severely affected man with fused elbow and knee?
Looks significantly younger. That's frontal bone, very pronounced frontal bossing. So in other words, this brow ridge, very male characteristic. Big nasal bones there, similar to the last man.
And with this skull, there are possible signs of abnormal bone development.
Goes there. So yeah, the height of the orbit looks very small. That is quite a short distance as well between the nose and the mouth. It's going to be really interesting to put this all together to see what happens to the rest of the face.
Caroline scans in the fractured pieces of both skulls using a 3D laser scanner. Final rebuilding will happen using computer software. Then the full effects of any disorder on their faces will start to emerge. But how did these two men and 111 others end up in mass graves in York? And how involved was the city in the Civil War? The First English Civil War was fought from 1642 to 1646, when supporters of Parliament rebelled against the tyrannical rule of King Charles I. At the outset, England was divided, with parliamentarian forces controlling the south and the north under royalist control. York was seen as the key to controlling the entire north of England. And historical records recount that in the spring of 1644, parliamentary forces pushed north and laid siege to the city. So, what impact did this have on York and its population? High up on the city's walls, Xanthi meets Civil War historian Martin Bennett.
Who was fighting?
Well, inside the city, you've got the Royalist Army of the Earl of Newcastle, about 4,000 of his soldiers inside the city.
So this side, where we are?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's outside?
Outside are 3 parliamentarian armies. When all 3 armies are gathered around, there are about 30,000 at the most.
But surely it would be easy then to take the city with 30,000 men.
There are 2 ways of taking a city. One is by storm and the other is to starve it out. Both of them carry their risks, and parliamentarians initially attempt to starve the garrison out.
But that wasn't going to be easy. It seems that the royalist soldiers had swept up all crops from the surrounding areas and were well prepared.
The people inside, in York, it's not as bad as it could be. They don't get to the stage of eating dogs and cats and rats, because there's plenty of food, plenty of water, plenty of breweries in town making beer, which is, of course, safer to drink than water. And effectively, they have enough to survive the 11 weeks of this siege.
30,000 parliamentarian soldiers spent 3 months camped outside the city walls. It seems that this was the critical moment for York's involvement in the Civil War. Were our 113 part of this besieging force? Amazingly, the siege is particularly well documented. At nearby King's Manor, Martin talks Xanthi through who took part.
Inside you've got the Earl of Newcastle's troops.
With the Royalists retreating inside the walls, parliamentarian forces gathered around the city.
What happens first is that the Scots arrive in this area, between the Ouse as it flows into the city and the Ouse as it flows out. So all of this sector here is occupied by Scots forces, and Fairfax's forces occupy this side from the Ouse here right round to the River Foss. What then happens is, towards the end of May, is the Earl of Manchester's army arrives and occupies the northern territory.
So they kind of spread out
now the city is completely ringed.
Yeah.
And as soon as that is achieved, then they begin to move inwards on the walls. So the suburbs begin to fall into the hands of Parliament.
And Martin has a theory about which of these armies our men could have come from.
Fairfax's forces begin to take over the suburbs outside Walmgate.
Aha, so does that mean that our mass grave is over here?
It's in this area here.
Right, okay, that is close,
not
isn't
far
it?
from the city walls.
Yeah.
Martin believes our men could have been soldiers from one very particular part of the parliamentarian army. 6,000 men under the command of Lord Fairfax. It's remarkable progress so early in the case, but it will take the results from the isotope testing to tell the team exactly where our soldiers came from. But what of the injuries to the bones Sue and Xanthi saw in the forensic tent? Are these consistent with soldiers fighting in the Civil War? Xanthi goes to Heslington Hall, where Lord Fairfax set up his camp during the siege. She meets Graham Webb and Richard Hawes from the Sealed Knot to learn about the weaponry, roles and injuries typical of 17th century warfare.
So here we have muzzle-loading musket, okay? Mainly used for firing a lead ball.
Yep.
It was inaccurate, so you're unlikely to actually hit anybody with it, although that's no comfort to anybody that's standing in front of it.
No.
Although there are no signs of musket ball damage on our men's bones, Richard thinks the musket could still be responsible.
Occasionally somebody would get hit and you'd get a horrific smash injuries and your friends would perhaps be falling down next to you.
Yeah.
Eventually, the morale of the group that you were firing at would perhaps break and they would run. And at which point, you turn it round the other way and you go chasing after them. And this is the real damage that is done with the butt end of the musket.
But how would this have actually worked in practice?
Richard thinks a musket used this way round could be responsible for leg breaks, dislocated elbows and broken clavicle bones in the shoulder. These are exactly the kind of injuries Xanthi and Sue saw on the remains in the tent. But what of the large muscle attachments also found on the bones? Could this be explained by another weapon commonly used by soldiers of the time? The pike.
The biggest and heaviest men carried these, right?
Oh, God.
Now, when you charge your pike, if you drop that pike straight down with your arm levelled behind, yes, you can then charge your pike at the enemy. Don't worry, I'm right under it. You feel the weight of that.
Better, yeah.
Keep that under your cheek, and if you hunch back a bit and put your elbow on your hip there, you should be able to take the weight there. Do you feel that? Oh,
yes,
sorry.
I can feel that.
You're straining there, aren't you? You're straining.
It's quite an awkward thing to hold.
So what you have to do now is you just lunge forward straight into the faces of the enemy there. Ah! And again, I go. Ah! I would have gone straight for the eye.
It takes a lot of strength to wield this, as well as balance and technique. So you'd expect quite well-built guys.
Absolutely. The people that used them were particularly selected from their strength and height and stature.
So the pikemen are really the brawn of the outfit.
Absolutely, yes.
All the historical evidence appears to indicate our men were soldiers from the Civil War. But will the carbon dating results confirm this?
1480 to 1687.
Hold on, 1480. So that's fine.
Yes.
These dates cover a broad period, with the Civil War lying at the latter end. But the team know they can eliminate the earlier dates because of the archaeological evidence on the ground.
The church, if you remember, was finished usage in 1580. That's why it was ruined when it looks like these men have gone in.
So we're now 1580 to 1687. And in the middle of that, right slap bang almost in the middle of that, is the siege date.
Yes.
With the siege being the only time in this period when so many men were gathered together in York, dating the burial to the English Civil War now seems certain.
What's important is that it supports what everything
exactly.
is telling us. So I think those large numbers, the regimentation of the burials, the fact that they're in the church, they're close to the city walls, everything is saying it's got to be a siege.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
Our 113 men likely never lived long enough to see victory when the Royalists gave up and left York in July 1644. And whether they were definitely parliamentarian soldiers under Lord Fairfax's command will only be confirmed when the isotope results come in. The team also still don't know what the cause of death of the men was. Although the skeletons showed no fatal wounds, many did have healed injury, and there were signs of infection. Could infections like these have killed all 113 of the men? To help understand what the cause of death might have been, Xanthi meets up with historian Rory Macready in a typical Civil War surgery. She starts by showing Rory some of the injuries from our men's bones.
Here we've got sharp force trauma to the elbow, so outside of the elbow, pretty deep actually.
Yeah.
What would have caused this?
Well, that was probably made by a sword, quite a deep cut. Probably in that sort of direction.
So some sort of defensive injury?
Yes.
It seems the surgeons did have some understanding of infection and how to manage it.
What we would do then is we would get something like oats, and I'm going to get honey. I'm going to mix the two together to make it into a paste, and then this will be put into the wound, and then we'd sew the wound up with that inside the wound.
Why did they leave that in?
Because it helps to heal. The honey would be used as an antiseptic. We didn't understand that, but we knew that it worked. In fact, today in some hospitals, when antibiotics don't work, they're using honey again to fight infections.
But as these treatments were nowhere near as effective as modern solutions, if the infection continued to spread, the surgeons had one last resort: amputation.
If I take your arm off at the elbow, you'll have about a 50-50 chance of surviving the operation. If I take it off at the shoulder, the chances are you will die.
Amputation was actually a highly sophisticated procedure surgeons were well versed in.
What we do first of all is we get a dismembering knife like this one here. The cutting edge on the inside.
It's a pretty serious knife.
It is. My assistant would hold your arm extremely tight, act like a tourniquet. The surgeon would then plunge the knife into the limb till he hits bone, and then in a very fast motion go round in a circular motion till we come back where we started.
Like opening a can.
It is. He or she would then yank the skin and muscle up the bone to expose the bone.
Yeah.
The bone saw would then be used, and as high as possible, I would saw through the bones.
Hopefully I'm unconscious.
Might not necessarily be.
Okay.
When you've sawn through the limb,
Yeah.
we then cauterise the wound. This would then go on the end of the stump.
Yeah.
What happens then, if they've done it right, the skin and muscle should be longer than the bone.
Yeah.
This should come down over the end, and now I've got squidgy bits to play with.
Yeah.
This will be pinned through the wound, and then put another pin the other way.
Why?
That way you can control the tightness. You'd put a figure of 8 loop of thread over the two ends of the pin.
Right.
I'll come along the next day, and what I'll do is I'll make that figure of 8 tighter and tighter and tighter to draw the skin and muscle over the end of the stump.
That's very clever.
Very clever.
They may not have had today's medical expertise and equipment, but Civil War surgeons were certainly competent enough to stop all our 113 men dying in one go. Simple infection can't be our cause of death. Back in Dundee, Sue is taking a closer look at the two skeletons with the extraordinary fused bones.
This individual was exceptional because this is the one where we had the most outrageous fusion that occurred at the elbow. So the hand permanently fixed in that position. And then, as if that wasn't enough, quite frankly, the absolute and utter pièce de résistance. Look at that. It's just the most outrageous specimen I think I've ever seen. So that we've got the long shaft of the femur, the thigh bone. We've got the tibia, the shin bone, at right angles. And where there should be a knee, there isn't a knee. It's fixed bone.
Sue's research has led her to believe that this could be a condition with the rarest classification possible, occurring in a maximum 1 person in every 200,000, and best illustrated by the other man's fused hand.
They call it carpal coalition syndrome because that's the most common bits that fuse together, all of these little bones. When bone forms, before it becomes bone, it's a big mass of cartilage. And if you think of it like cheddar cheese, that big lump of cheese was never cut. And so we think that this is about a malformation of the joints. This is a rare genetic condition. To find one of those is rare. To find 2 individuals that may be displaying the same thing can't be a coincidence. It absolutely can't be a coincidence.
Sue has discovered that the man with the dramatically fused knee and elbow also has fused bones in his wrist. It's significant new evidence to link the conditions of the 2 men.
He has a carpal coalition too, but it's only 2 of the bones. And the bones that it is are the bones that are sitting down at the base of the thumb. So this one that's called the trapezium and the trapezoid. These 2 little bones have fused together.
Carpal coalition syndrome is a genetic condition that's passed from parent to child.
It's inherited. If it's in your family, it stays in your family. And what's the likelihood of that occurring randomly alongside somebody else with that? You know, I don't like coincidences. I don't believe in the tooth fairy, and I don't believe in coincidence.
But Sue has to be sure. So the bones are put through a CT scanner, which looks inside the bones to give detailed images viewable from any angle. Will the results confirm or disprove Sue's diagnosis? Along with her colleague, Dr. Roos Eisma, she scours the images.
This is the whole tray laid out as it went through the scanner.
Look at this, isn't that amazing? Look at that knee
fused.
And look at that elbow. This is the knee. This, oh, look, go back. Look. Isn't that interesting? When you've got the 2 pillars of the joint, they're continuous. All the other bits of the bone are formed. All the normal growing bits are there. What isn't there is the joint.
The space in between.
Yeah, there's no joint space. Now that isn't trauma. That isn't disease. That's embryological. Yeah. That's our multiple synostosis syndrome. That's the most amazing image.
Sue's instincts are confirmed.
The only question now is, okay, we know they've got that syndrome, we've diagnosed the syndrome, are they related?
DNA samples have been taken from the bones of the 2 men under sterile conditions. These results could confirm any familial link between the 2 soldiers, but the results are still some days away. What is already clear is that the man with the fused arm and leg would have had to live with his disability from birth. But how would he have coped with such severe disability 350 years ago? And what function could he have served in a Civil War army? Xanthi heads to Kent University to meet Julie Anderson, specialist in the history of disability. Julie has brought along a range of wooden replica crutches and supports the disabled soldier could have used.
They look pretty simple, just whatever's going to help somebody get around.
Yes, crutch design remains very simple until the 20th century. They were generally pieces of wood, carved with some padding put on the support area under the arm.
So how mobile would the man have been? To find out, Julie's assistant Jack is given replica crutches and a knee support the man would likely have used.
Let you do that. Now, let's see if you can not fall over, I guess.
We'll go for it.
Yeah, yeah. Now imagine if you like this all the time, you'd obviously get a bit more efficient, but he's moving all right, isn't he? We're not looking at somebody who would have just, had to sit down and not do anything, and he's still got use of this hand, even though, so literally it's here that's fused, so you could still use all the movement at the shoulder, and you've still got a viable wrist joint.
He wouldn't have fought, but Julie is sure there were plenty of other jobs he could have done.
His job would have perhaps been an ancillary worker, perhaps a cook, or maybe even, as he was a big man, guarding the ordnance, where all the munitions and the muskets and things like that were kept.
Despite a permanently fused elbow and knee, he could have functioned quite well.
You're standing at a bench,
right.
Balancing now. What do you think? You managed to be a cook or a guard or something?
I'd imagine the balance might have been an issue, but you get used to it. So
yeah,
with the right arm, you can obviously do a lot of things. So
by the time
I imagine so.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see it firsthand how this could have looked, because when you just see the remains, you think this guy would have been pretty much stuck doing nothing.
Exactly.
And Julie has rare illustrations of how people affected by disability may have lived around that time.
We've got some images here of a range of disabled people from the period.
Some of them have got musical instruments and things.
Well, they would have been working people. You have to remember that there was no institutionalization really before the 19th century, so people had to just go out and make their own living, which a lot of people did as best they could.
Because some of these are in pairs, like this person looks blind and they're being led by somebody else.
Yes, that was common too. They would get together in bands,
yeah,
and look after each other. It's the same for our man in the military. He would have been part of a group, and they would have looked after him.
They wouldn't have seen him as unusual?
No, not at all. In fact, the word normal doesn't really come into common usage in the English language until the early part of the 19th century.
Was there just no purpose for it?
No, it wasn't necessary. People were just who they were.
But despite this apparent tolerance, relatives often suffered. Extreme religious beliefs saw disability as a sign that the person's family had committed a sin.
They would be ostracized, they would be shunned by their communities, and it was difficult. Some families had to move away, but often when the disabled person grew up, they would leave home.
And the military could prove useful in these circumstances.
Would disabled people actually have gone into the military to relieve their families of that burden?
Absolutely, and because unemployment was a problem amongst disabled people, often the military provided a haven for them in order for them to be paid at a job.
So it's not a surprise to have found the disabled in the army, even holding down a key job. Nor is it a surprise to find two disabled men grouped together for support. Back in Dundee, Caroline and her colleague Chris Rinn are close to reconstructing what our two men may have looked like. The older man is missing his front tooth from the blow to the face he took, likely in battle. But the more severely disabled man's face has been more complicated.
It's been a really challenging process for me with this one. This was very definitely asymmetry that was extreme. It's just been really interesting to try and show the face of someone with a congenital condition. And we're seeing some dysmorphia, some changes to the facial structure that may be connected to this condition. What I've done is to take in a nose from a database and then try and distort that to fit with the bones. You can see that we've got quite a bent shape to the lateral nasal bones, the bones on the side of the nose, which is suggesting this shape here. And one of the things that I've noted a lot in the literature for this condition, we may have to consider giving him cross eyes, because that seems to be a likely option.
But were these two men really related? as their shared rare condition suggests. To find out, the team gather to hear the results of the DNA analysis, with Sue especially on tenterhooks.
A bit frustratingly, they came back as
I
having...
don't even like that now. You've already gone too far.
They don't have the same mother.
But we've got DNA out of it.
Yes, DNA was viable. It does not appear to be contaminated.
Okay. But?
Apparently, though, looking for the male lineage on the Y chromosome is much. You've got to go right down to the nuclear level, and the DNA is not viable at that level. Don't look at me like that.
Well, that's just rubbish, quite frankly.
So we can't
that's
say
unacceptable.
we can't
That's
say that they're
absolutely
not
unacceptable.
brothers, fraternal brothers, but we can say that we can't tell, and they're not maternally related.
Frustratingly for Sue, the DNA shows the two men aren't related by mother, and it isn't good enough quality to prove whether they were related by father or not. But Sue's not going to give up on her theory easily.
So it is possible that they could still be related,
Yeah.
but we just can't show it. I think, you know, the chances of having this condition in individuals who are not related and are in the same, pretty much almost the same grave at the same time would be stretching it a bit far.
They could still be cousins or half-brothers, but where were they from? The isotope results are also in. Will these help to determine whether the men were part of Lord Fairfax's parliamentary army?
The two do have the same isotopic signature.
Good.
And I've got some interesting data for the diet, which is quite specifically interesting to these guys. They had a 20 to 25% fish intake in their diet, which is really high. Normally we'd be looking at 0 to 5%. In York, you can have, unless it's fresh water, but these have got a really high fish, both of the brothers.
So it has to be coastal.
This is a fascinating discovery for the team. The isotopes say both our men had high marine diets. But how does this fit with the theory that they were part of Fairfax's army in York? Civil War expert Andrew Hopper thinks he has the answer and has invited Xanthi to the Yorkshire port of Hull to explain.
Hull was the most important northern port town held by Parliament during the Civil Wars. Prior to the Siege of York, it was also the base of the parliamentarian commander in Yorkshire, Lord Fairfax. Quite a large proportion of Lord Fairfax's parliamentarian army from Yorkshire came from Hull and in the parishes around it. There was a large merchant fleet based here, and many of the seamen volunteered to fight for Parliament.
So you say now that these guys I've been looking at that I presumed are soldiers would actually have originally been sailors?
It's very likely that they had been, yes.
But why would sailors be useful to Lord Fairfax in the Siege of York?
Hull's sailors would all have been experienced cannoneers, experienced artillerymen. They would have served on merchant vessels that had been armed, and they'd also been probably quite hardy folk, having sailed across the North Sea. So they would have been prized commodities in a siege situation.
So our men's experience with cannon on board ship could have made them highly useful in a siege war.
Lord Fairfax invested the city from the southeast between the rivers Foss and Ouse and set up his gun batteries on Lamel Hill. And from there they would pour down fire and the royalist defences were.
Well, that's really interesting because the mass graves, and specifically these two brothers in arms, they were buried very near there. So they were probably actually part of this actual military operation, weren't they?
Yes, I should think it's very likely.
Do we have any documentary evidence available from the time?
Well, the garrison accounts of Hull in 1642 and 1643 survive.
Oh, wow.
And they're very detailed, and they give us the names of 3 of the gunners,
Really?
3 of the cannoneers in Hull.
Oh, is this actually from the original document, a copy of it?
Yes, we have here Thomas Coatsforth and the cannoneers at the blockhouse, James Hunter and the cannoneers in the town, and another gentleman here, Cowling the gunner, mentioned in the accounts.
It's a bit of a reach, but theoretically, one of these men could be one of the men I've been looking at.
Well, if they weren't one of the men you were looking at, it's very likely they would have been very well known or personally known to them.
That's pretty close, isn't it?
But why would a group of sailors give up their livelihoods and sign up to fight in Fairfax's land army? Was there a greater motivation behind their actions? Xanthi meets Civil War specialist Diane Purkis at Holy Trinity in York, a simple church she believes the parliamentarian soldiers would have approved of.
They felt this was what God wanted, absolute plainness and spareness. Anything else was an insult to him. This plainness permeated people's whole lives. You'd live the right way, you'd be chaste, you'd be abstinent, you'd read the Bible every day.
Many ordinary Englishmen joined the parliamentarian cause because they hated the elaborate ritualistic church King Charles I stood for, as well as his belief he was appointed by God to rule by divine right.
He tried to impose on the Church of England a much more posh, hierarchical, glittering, bishop-driven kind of model of what the Church of England ought to be, and these people didn't want a bar of it. But they also thought that was actually icon worship, something that pretended to represent God, but actually broke the second commandment, where God says, "Thou shalt not make unto thyself a graven image."
How do we go from religious fervour to war?
Well, some of these guys actually thought that they were fighting in the last battle between Christ and the forces of Antichrist. Some of the more radical ones believed that if they acted rightly, it would actually inspire Christ to come down from heaven and rule the world.
And save the world.
And save the world, and create an ideal world.
Well, that's worth dying for then. It's a massive cause.
Yeah, exactly.
And Diane has written evidence of the soldiers' religious fervour.
This is actually a letter that was sent to London. This man plainly thought he was God's soldier. It's actually headed, "A relation of the great victory obtained by God's assistance by the Parliament's forces." And the letter itself says, "Sir, by God's blessing, I can tell you I am alive, and so are you. And by God's victorious arm, the Church of God is alive."
So each and every man thought he was God's soldier?
Yeah, and they thought the army was the Church of God. So now the opposing royalists in the field are God's enemies.
They're radicalised. That's how we see it today.
That's right, yeah. So the experience of serving in this army and thinking these kinds of religious thoughts has radicalised this man.
Was it this same religious conviction that drove our men to the Siege of York and their eventual demise? The team believe they now know where the men were from. They know who they were fighting for and what their motivation was. But they still don't know how they died.
There is evidence of having fracture occur to bone, but it's very well healed. There's an evidence of infection to bone, but again, it's very well healed. All of this is consistent with them being a fighting force, but it's not consistent with what caused their death. And if you can rule out the infection side and the trauma side, the only thing that's really left as a feasible cause of death is going to be disease. It has to be disease as the most likely cause of death for so many individuals.
How would doctors have dealt with disease back in the 17th century? Xanthi goes to the Museum of the History of Science in Oxford to meet medical historian Dr. Erica Charters.
Got an intriguing little box here. Do we need the gloves?
So we need the gloves on to touch some of this.
Erica has a remarkable device used to treat disease and fever until the late 19th century, and similar to those doctors would have used during the English Civil War.
This is actually to let blood.
Right.
Now, this is where the exciting bit happens. This would go right up against your skin.
Yeah.
Oh. Before you know it, it would cut into your skin. It would make very small incisions, and this would allow you to let some blood out. And of course, bloodletting was Well, it's been very popular for a long time, so definitely in the 17th century they would have been doing this. So you just press the button there and hold it.
Oh, it's quite powerful, isn't it?
It is quite powerful, and you can see where it's cut into the paper.
Yeah. So was there an idea that there were poisons in the blood that you actually wanted to release by bloodletting?
Very much so. And what we do see, especially for fevers, remembering if you think of how someone looks who has a fever, they're flushed, they're very warm, their pulse is beating very quickly, so it almost looks like they have an excess of blood. So it's not surprising that some people felt that letting out some of that excess of blood would return you to health.
Does it actually have any benefits?
Not that we know of, no.
With little more than bloodletting as a treatment, and with thousands of men camped closely together during the siege, Erica believes she knows what could have killed the 113 men.
Something like typhus fever, the incubation is probably around 3 weeks, and very commonly what we see in diaries of sieges is that after about 3 weeks during a siege, we see outbreaks of disease.
How does it spread?
Well, it's very contagious. Typhus is interesting because it's spread through body lice, and they actually live in the seams of your clothing. So it's a particular kind of insect which is a vector for the pathogen. And what's interesting about it is the lice only like living at the temperature of your body. So they will only stay in your clothes when you're wearing your clothes, which is why we often see it in sieges. It's very common in wintertime when people keep their clothes on. So it could possibly have been there even during the summer in York.
And what are the symptoms?
Well, it's a general fever, a kind of weakening, very often a very intense headache. Sometimes you see a rash.
How many people died of typhus?
Well, it depends. We know that when we look at case fatality rates, so if you catch it, what the chances are that you will die. We've seen during the First World War, it reached rates such as 70%. And because it's so contagious, if you're in a small area together, there's a good chance that almost everyone will catch it.
Because it was so contagious, did they die from this more so than from fighting?
It would be much more likely that you might die of disease. And of course, it's not a very glorious death.
No.
It's one thing to die on the battlefield. It's another thing to die of something like diarrhea or a fever. It's not exactly the way that you want to go.
The team finally has a plausible, if tragic, explanation for how the men in the mass graves died. A virulent outbreak of typhus fever, a disease that has afflicted besieging armies from ancient times right up to Stalingrad in the Second World War. With the final part of the puzzle in place, it's time for the story the bones have told to be relayed back to the local community. The cold case team has returned to York. There to hear their findings are those who originally excavated the site and experts who have assisted the team.
I'm hoping to find out more of why they died, more about why they were buried in that particular spot, and who buried them and at what period of the Civil Wars they were buried in. All those questions that purely the historical evidence isn't able to answer.
The facial reconstructions is something I haven't been involved with before, and hopefully that'll give us an insight, a closer insight into the people who we're dealing with.
Ghoulishly exciting.
Sue reveals the bigger story of the Civil War.
It's reasonable to suspect that they're going to be fighting men.
She unpacks how the men would have died.
What do we find in terms of a cause of death? Well, we don't find trauma. What we've been told is that, in fact, more people died as a result of disease.
The more intimate story of disability.
His right leg would have been fixed that way. A condition that is so rare, we don't have an incidence for the rarity of it.
And how the science tied two remarkable men's lives together in death.
So now what we've got are two individuals buried in the same location with the rarest of genetic conditions, not with the same mother. Hopefully their father had a bike, but not with the same mother, with exactly the same stable isotopes in terms of where they've come from, and with exactly the same unusual marine-based diet of a very high proportion. They have got to go together.
The final part of the investigation is to bring these two soldiers back to life, beginning with the man with just a fused hand.
It's a strong face. It's a very strong face.
Yeah.
It's actually quite a pleasant face.
He would fit in amongst us, wouldn't he?
Then there is the more severely affected man.
Now, I don't know whether his squint eye was inward pointing or outward pointing. When we looked at the literature, inward pointing seemed to be more common.
These guys would have been used to seeing people who'd had much more major battlefield wounds. And, you know, like your face cut in half by a cavalry sabre, you're losing an eye to a pike. That asymmetry is relatively slight in comparison with what they would have seen.
And for Sue, it's this man's story that has been the greatest revelation.
He was active. So he's not a passive person. He's been with the rest of them, treated the same way as the rest of them. Whether we now might think of him differently in terms of a disability, that disability wasn't being recognized as him being an outcast. He was treated very, very much like the others. It is an absolutely unique set of remains. It is fascinating.
They give us that opportunity to bring the science in, use the historical background, and it really fleshes out those people that we're dealing with during that quite tumultuous period of English history.
So science gave you everything I was hoping for. It gave you that element that the historical document can't deal with. It gave us something beyond the paper, beyond the page, and beyond the text.
The guy with the disabilities, I was just fascinated that such a guy could find a place in Fairfax's army. I think that tells us something so important about the way this war was developing and the way people were thinking. Because plainly, we've got an evolving meritocracy here. Every man was supposed to be good for their job, and if they were good for their job, that was good enough. And that was what led, really, to the modern parliamentary democracy that we all enjoy.
The Cold Case team has uncovered two remarkable tales. The larger story of the 113. Strong, committed men fighting for a cause, tragically cut down by disease before their victory was assured. But also the personal story of two men, likely closely related, who despite huge disadvantages stayed together in life and death, forever brothers in arms. The story complete, their remarkable bones are now handed back to the community.
This has been such an amazing story because it brings so many different elements together. It is a huge historical story, but it's also an incredibly important story. I'm not aware in the literature of anywhere of this type of remains ever having been recorded before. I think this is a first. I may be wrong, but I think it is a first.